Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the inaugural Legislative Summit of the Commission for Nurse Reimbursement. I am Melissa Mills and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director for the Commission. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to each of you for taking time to be here with us today. The summit represents a significant step forward in our collective mission to address and improve the critical issue of nurse reimbursement in our healthcare system. I've had the honor of being a registered nurse for 26 years. In that time, I've seen firsthand the dedication, compassion, and expertise that nurses bring to the bedside every day. I've also experienced the challenges of a cost minimization workforce, the lack of work-life balance, the scarcity of resources, negative impact to patient outcomes, and the inevitable burnout that results. It's these experiences that have fueled my passion for this work and my commitment to advocating for a sustainable and equitable reimbursement model that truly values the contributions of each nurse. Throughout the day, you are going to hear from an impressive lineup of experts and thought leaders who will share their insights and perspectives on nursing, healthcare administration, and of course, reimbursement modernization and possible models. Our goal is to spark meaningful conversations and collaborations that will lead to actionable solutions. Before we dive into our agenda, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. We've scheduled morning and afternoon breaks with refreshments provided downstairs. Please feel free during this time to step out, stretch your legs, and network with your fellow attendees. A buffet lunch will be served on this floor at 12:30. And restrooms are located on all 3 floors with conference areas upstairs, and you can also go up there for lunch. I have to thank a few very special people, and that would be Marini Kim, Shannon Lunn, and Jane Jepson, who is downstairs. Without these ladies, we would not all be here today. They have been extremely instrumental, and I just want to thank them for their support and dedication to the mission. And of course, if you need anything throughout the day, you can come to me or any one of them and we'll be happy to help you. Again, welcome to the summit. Let's make today a catalyst for positive change in the nursing profession. And now I have the honor and privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Rebecca Love. She is an esteemed nurse executive, renowned speaker, and a prominent figure in the nursing profession. She's a regular contributor on Forbes Business Council. She's been featured in BBC, Fortune, Becker's, Forbes, Stat Chief Healthcare Executive Magazine, and ABC News. She made history as the first nurse to be featured on TED.com and is recognized as one of LinkedIn's top voices and was nominated as one of modern healthcare's most influential people in healthcare. She is also the author of 2 international best-selling books on nurse innovation and is a national and international expert on nursing workforce. Her visionary leadership gave birth to the Nurse Hackathon, a movement that has sparked innovation and driven significant advancements in nursing. In early 2019, she co-founded and currently serves as the president of SONSIEL, the Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders. This nonprofit organization quickly gained recognition as a United Nations affiliate member, showcasing the global impact of Rebecca's work. She also founded the Commission for Nurse Reimbursement in January of 2023 to address the nationwide concerns of nurse staffing shortages and the nurse reimbursement model. Her educational background includes a Master of Science in Nursing from Northeastern University and a Bachelor's of Arts in International Relations and Spanish from Boston University. Please welcome Rebecca Love.
Good morning, everybody. We have a long agenda in front of us. We're going to dive into the topics that we're here for today, so thank you for being with us. We want to start a little bit with the history of nursing in the United States because it's important for us to understand where it started and where it was going. In the early 1900s, women at this point had been fighting for women's right to vote for over 60 years. Now, largely, nurses at that time had not gotten involved in the women's suffrage movement, but the night before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration in 1913, for the first time ever, the American nurses formally supported the effort of women's rights to vote and joined in the largest march on the capital's history for women's rights to vote in 1913. It took 7 more years, but nursing became instrumental in fighting for women's right to vote, which was accorded and happened in 1920s. And in the 1920s, nursing became the largest economic vehicle for women's financial independence in the history of the United States. At that time, nursing was its own special practice. Private families, private individuals hired private duty nurses to perform nursing care. Similar to our physician colleagues, they were paid independently for the services that they provided. And in the 1920s, largely thanks to some of the research done by John Welton here in this room, hospitals were places of deplorable conditions. Only the most destitute would seek care within our hospital institutions. At that time, as surgery started to get better, patients started to hire these private duty nurses to come into hospital systems and provide care. As care got better, hospitals started to see the value of nurses and started to employ nurses into hospital systems. Now, at that time, in the 1920s, every single hospital bill listed out nursing services on the bill to actually show the impact of what patients were paying for, identifying nurses as a reimbursable action within these hospital systems. At that time, however, nursing was a female profession. Hospitals were run by men. Physicians were men. And as women started to grow their economic independence, there was a movement to clamp down on this economic model that would actually remove nurses from an identifiable economic impact, capture their services, but not give them the knowledge by which the economic model that they created for systems existed. So in the 1930s, with the development of national insurance, hospitals looked for a model that would capture these services in a way that would still allow nurses to work for them, but be largely invisible. They turned to hotels, saw that maids were rolled into room rates, and they took this model to nursing. And they rolled nursing into the room rates of hospital systems. This movement effectively made nursing services invisible in history. It placed nursing services into the room rate and effectively made nursing a cost to healthcare systems by which there was no mechanism which their services could be reimbursed for the services that they provide. And still, 100 years later, nursing is the only degreed profession that does not have a reimbursement model for which they can be paid for their services. So I want to pose a question. Where would nursing be today? Where would women be today? If 100 years ago that model had not taken it all away from the economic mission for women. But also, last night a friend said, imagine where healthcare would be today. If people could be reimbursed to actually have nursing services provided to them when they needed them, and that is reimbursed by insurance. Similar to when your kids get hurt and they can go to a physical therapist independently, or you're dealing with occupational therapy or any kind of therapy you need, nursing is the only one that we as individuals in this healthcare system cannot access nursing services directly and pay for those services to support our families or our loved ones, leading to the largest crisis of access to care in healthcare. If we allowed nurses to be reimbursed, the entire future of healthcare would change and the health of our nation would change because the average person would be able to employ and insert nursing services to support the well-being of their loved ones and their families. Today, nurses are still rolled into room rates, a cost to healthcare systems, the only degreed healthcare profession in all healthcare that still is unable to bill for our services. As nurses are a cost, anybody in business here knows that as business goes, if there is no way to pay for something, there is no business. We cut costs. We do not invest in cost, and this is what we have done to the nursing workforce for decades, if not centuries. It is the only profession where it is constantly and consistently said that there is no more money to invest in nursing workforces. We can never employ more nurses because there is no dollars to do so. And these situations are playing out every single year in every single state, in every single healthcare system across the United States. Proof and case of this exact situation occurred last year in Minnesota, when the situation raised, there was an act of Congress that moved forward called something called Keeping Nurses at the Bedside Act. This bipartisan bill passed both the House of Representatives all the way to the Senate office, in which it reached the governor's desk. And in the 11th hour of that, it was reported that on May 5th, the Mayo Clinic has given Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and the state lawmakers an ultimatum over 2 bills that aim to increase nurse staffing levels and rein in healthcare costs. Gut the bills, or the nonprofit hospital system will pull billions in planned investment out of the state. Mayo did this because they knew if they actually managed to the amount of acuity that nurses needed to address those patients, they did not have a financial model that would fund and support the nursing workforce to do so. There was no funding mechanism by which to support more nurses to provide better care and safely staff nurses to the level that drove patient outcomes, as opposed to profit situations making to support the operational budget of hospital systems. Guess who won in this situation? Mayo did. Keeping Nurses at the Bedside Act was not supported, it was voted down, and still in the state of Minnesota, we do not have a mechanism by which to drive the effectiveness of nursing care per acuity level for patients within hospital systems. Now there is plenty of money in healthcare. And what we have come to learn is that most legislators believe that all the money that they're sending to hospital systems and healthcare systems are actually going to fund the nursing workforce. What we have learned in our time is that there was a belief that the CARES Act dollars that actually went to supplement the nursing workforce during the pandemic was a model by which existed and was simply greatly invested in during the time of the pandemic. But that is actually false. The truth is, all dollars that are currently going to healthcare actually never go to fundamentally support or fund the nursing workforce. And an example of this actually was shown during a study by the North Carolina Treasurer's Office, who wanted to investigate after a situation arose at Novant's healthcare system, which they had eliminated over 300 nurses, and a nurse called in and said, patients are dying in our emergency room. The wait times are 19, 24 hours, and there is no nurses here to provide care to patients. The Treasurer's Office wanted to understand what had happened to the billions of dollars they had invested into the hospital system if it was not, in fact, going to support the nursing workforce. And here's what the study found. Nonprofit hospital executives enriched themselves while following a process of healthcare affordability in North Carolina. A new analysis of hospital data finds that nonprofit hospital CEOs doubled their paychecks in less than 5 years, a fraction of the time previously thought. The report concluded that nonprofit hospitals paid top executives nearly $1.7 billion in the last decade. That compares to the time that family medicine physicians' wages rose only 22.7% or 2.7% per year, while registered nurses' salaries only increased 14.8% in that exact time a decade, or 1.4% per year. In North Carolina, most nonprofit hospital systems, CEOs doubled their paychecks in just 5 years, half the time previously thought. And despite pleading poverty and taking $1.5 billion in taxpayer-funded COVID relief, the majority of hospital top executives did not cut their own paychecks in 2020. There is disturbing evidence further that hospital executive pay is not meaningfully linked to either patient safety or nonprofit hospitals' charitable missions. And during the pandemic, at the time when there was no treatment, no PPE, no vaccine, the movement by the American Hospital Association was not to cap executive pay, but was an initiative to cap nursing pay. In 2021, the American Hospital Association urged the White House to cap travel nurse pay, which effectively would cap nursing pay across the entire nation along those lines. Nurses, because they are cost to healthcare systems, enter into what's referred to a capitated payment model. Nurses will make an increased salary over a year up to the time of 20 years of experience, at which point they cap out of all their earning potential. On average, the average nurse salary increase over the course of the last decade has only been 1.6%, or half the cost of living adjustments. And the truth is why this is a problem is that actually the only meaningful increase in nursing salary based on labor statistics was actually occurred in 2020, when the average increase of nursing salary increased by 3.29%, which was still less than half of the 5.9% for the average individual working in the United States. The truth is the model fails us not only from the inability of us able to actually staff nursing to the correct ratios to provide patient care, but it fundamentally devalues and underpays a workforce that is absolutely critical for healthcare to work. As I mentioned before, there is plenty of money in healthcare, but the reimbursement models that fund our healthcare workforce have no funding mechanism to support the nursing workforce. More nurses equal more costs without any associated revenue, so we staff nurses to the lowest cost denominator, fueling the nursing crisis. The failures are not of our profession. We are not the ones responsible for our burnout. We are not the ones who cannot hack the environments that we live in, making it a failure of our profession, unable to manage the environments that are failing us. But it's a failure of systemic barriers that prevent parity for the nursing workforce to all other healthcare professionals in the United States. Currently, there are 3 systemic barriers that fail the nursing workforce. The first is that nursing, as one of the leading professions, is not designated as a STEM profession. This denies nursing from access of billions of dollars to research funding and scholarships that would support the nursing workforce. We have a person here in the audience, Chris, who recently submitted in a letter to reclassify nursing with the Department of Homeland Security that hopefully will move in August to reclassify nurses as STEM, opening up nearly $1.2 billion investment, because if you were unaware, nurses today burden the cost of their education 100% on their shoulders because there is no federal scholarships that allow them access to this education. And the ROI on a nursing education from our top 50 nursing schools in this country will never pan out from an investment perspective from their earning capacity on a go-forward basis. Next, nursing is the only profession that does not have National Provider Identifier numbers, NPI numbers. What this means is nurses are invisible within our electronic health records and within our systems to track the work that we do. Without NPI numbers, not only does fee-for-service fail, but so does value-based care. Because in value-based care models, it has to track back to the provider who is doing the work, and in this situation, nurses are part of the room, so patients spontaneously are going to get better based on the room that they stand in if we do not get nurses identified with NPI numbers. And lastly, in all the years and decades that I have spent fighting for the nursing workforce, trying to figure out solutions that will save and stabilize this profession, the only way we will stabilize it is if we create a reimbursement model that changes the future so that we invest in this profession, stop treating them as a cost, and create a system of parity so that we can create a sustainable workforce for the nursing profession, and with it, create sustainability for the nursing healthcare institution. Because it is time we change the failures of history. There is simply no healthcare without nurses. So let's talk a little bit about the state of the nursing workforce. There are over 19.3 million nurses in the world wide, and in the United States there are 5 million nurses, making nurses not only the largest profession in healthcare, but actually the largest profession in the United States. There are more nurses in the United States today than there are police officers, teachers, any other kind of representation in this one. The median age in the United States of a nurse has dropped down to 46 years of experience, which reflects a decrease of 6 years for each cohort from 2020 data, largely due to the estimated losses of a workforce of at least 200,000 experienced RNs. Nearly 100,000 RNs left the field during the COVID pandemic, And what the latest studies are showing is that nearly 800,000 more nurses plan to exit the profession by 2027. The United States graduates 185,000 nursing students a year, making nursing student graduations the largest profession that is graduated of any program in the United States. But what we don't realize and what we don't talk about is that based on data, 57% of new nursing graduates leave the bedside within 2 years of practice. This is the largest exodus of any profession in the United States. We produce plenty of nurses. We do not retain nurses. And this is a crisis no one is talking about, and that statistic of 57% exiting has nothing to do with the pandemic. It predates the pandemic back to 2019. This is not a crisis that exists because of the current environment. It is a crisis that has existed in nursing for decades, that has simply gone to let's produce more nurses as opposed to let's retain them. But what has changed since the pandemic is that for the first time ever, the average length of experience of a nurse on a 12-hour shift has dropped from 6 years prior to the pandemic to less than 2.8 years of experience on a 12-hour shift. What that means today is that if you walk into a hospital room and you ask for their most experienced nurse, you are at best giving somebody who is proficient, if not novice, in their level of care to provide care for you. Now, if you were to do that and walk into your banker and say, give me the most experienced person that you have to help me plan my retirement accounts, and they said, this is great, I have somebody with 2 years of experience here to help you. That is exactly what we would do. We would laugh. But we are not demanding the same situation from what is going on in our hospital systems, and because of this, we are seeing the outcomes of patient outcomes drop throughout the entire country. Outcomes are worse than ever before. Patients in healthcare is more costly than ever before, and we keep coming at the problem with the same solutions we always have, which is leading us down failure. So what is going on in nursing? Because I hear often about physician burnout and that this is a crisis, but let us talk about some of the numbers to show the sentiment of nursing versus physicians. And based on research from March 23, 45% of all inpatient nurses were looking to leave their role within 6 months. 52% of these nurses cited feeling undervalued by their organization, and 45% of them say the reason that they are leaving is because they have unmanageable workloads. And when nurses have unmanageable workloads, what they mean is they can't do their jobs and their patients are at risk of dying. This is not simply, I have paperwork that is mounting on my desk that I will now need to give up my vacation. When nurses cannot manage their work, patients are harmed or die. Now this compares very differently to our physician colleagues. 76% of physicians state that they are very well likely to be at their organizations in 3 years from now. 78% feel that their organization recognizes their contribution to their organization's success. But where there is strong alignment is 80% of physicians identify the staffing crisis as the #1 issue impacting their organization. Any good physician will tell you, I can be as good as the best in the world, but if I do not have competent nurses to care for that patient, my patients will die. Nurses are absolutely the reason that patients are in hospitals today. A quick snapshot to show you the turnover. This was provided by Neon Lardell, the amount of nurses who apply into nursing school, those that fail out of nursing school, those that start the career, into those who remain in nursing within 2 years. As you see, this cycle is not sustainable, nor is it one that is worth continuing to invest in unless we figure out why so many are leaving. Because the truth is, the reason that patients are in hospitals today is that without 24/7 monitoring and care by a nurse, their life is at risk. Everything else can be done outpatient. OT, PT, respiratory therapy, all of that can be done outpatient. For God's sake, if we did not need nurses, we could simply put them in hotels, give them AI, and they're going to care for themselves and get home and be better. The reality is, nurses are absolutely critical to the outcomes of patients. Because healthcare is a highly complex environment as defined by the World Health Organization, which means complex systems are systems whose behavior is intrinsically difficult to model due to the dependencies, competitions, and relationships. It is only the nurse who manages all of that to keep patients going forward and driving outcomes for them. And the one fundamental truth in every single research study and model, the greatest contributor, the only denominator that drives mortality in hospitals, is the amount of nurses to patient ratios. Based on this study out of NIH, after adjusting for patient and hospital characteristics, size, teaching status, and technology, each additional patient per nurse was associated with a 7% increase of the likelihood of dying within 30 days of admission. This study has been replicated time and time again, and it is the only factor that does not change when it drives patient outcomes. But instead of more nurses, the answer in the last 10 years has largely been more technology. And technology that was sold to us as going to provide us another tool. But for nurses, it simply provided us another task. Based on studies that have come out, the average admission that used to be an 8x12 piece of paper that could be done in 10 minutes has now extended to about 6 feet worth of documentation and takes a minimum of 45 minutes to 60 minutes to do a number of clicks, simply not to provide care, but to drive reimbursement for insurance companies. Technology investments came and were promised to us to help decrease our workload, but have largely increased our workloads. And why that matters is nursing is a high-stakes job and has become more and more litigious. And as we did not know, nurses are now being criminally prosecuted for the failures in their environments. We used to be only civilly prosecuted, but as of March 2022, Radhonda Vaught was found guilty of negligent homicide and gross negligence of an impaired adult for administering a medication error in which she self-reported. Her system was down, she was forwarded to another floor, she was training another nurse, she grabbed the wrong medication because of the mistake that was going on in the Pyxis. A jury, she reported it, she was found not guilty by the boards of nursing, but the Attorney General came forward of Tennessee and criminally prosecuted her. She was found guilty by a jury of our peers, facing 9 years of prison, but thank God the judge gave her leniency and recognized that the environment in which she served and failed her to protect her. Now, me as a nurse, I always knew that if I made a mistake, I could lose my job. I could lose my livelihood, I could be sued civilly, but I never expected that as a nurse, I could also lose my freedom for doing the best I could to care for patients in environments that are not working to save them. We as nurses across the United States cried foul, saying this is the first step. Many said, no, it's not a problem, it's a one-off. But then we went and saw what happened in September 22 in North Carolina, in which the Supreme Court then went on ruled, based on bad case law around advanced practice nursing, that a nurse now can be held legally and criminally liable for following a doctor's orders that results in harm to a patient. And in the state of Ohio, the Attorney General prosecuted more than 100 nursing home workers, CNAs and nurses, but not one nursing home owner for harm that existed in long-term care when there was no staff to provide care. Why would anyone choose to be a nurse today? And what has happened in the last decade is that nurses now commit suicide at twice the rate of the female population in the United States, twice the rate. And I want to leave you with a story of a young woman, Tristan Smith, a 28-year-old nurse who committed suicide on August 7th, 2023. Her family found this letter on her laptop after her suicide that she had wrote earlier in March that year. She titled the letter, "A Letter to My Abuser." The abuser she was addressing is the hospital system in which she worked for. And here is an excerpt. "Each day you ask me to do more with less. You beat me to the point that my body and my mind are black, bruised, and bleeding out. I'm only sorry to my patients and colleagues. You deserve so much better. But my partner is relentless. If I stay, I will lose my sanity, and possibly my life forever. Her family found this on her computer and shared it at her funeral. Something is seriously wrong. Because I can tell you of the nurses of past generations, of my mother's and my grandmother's generations, they did not come home to this level of trauma. And we are seeing incredible amounts of unionization and strikes at the largest level of labor disputes ever in the history of the United States, but also globally. September 2022 led the largest strikes ever in Minnesota, followed by the largest strikes in January 2023 of nurses across New York State. But then we also saw our counterparts in England in nursing. 50% of all nurses went on strike in May 2023 after a report came out that showed 1 shift in 5 shifts, nurses were working place for free because of inflation over the course of the last decade. We then went on October 2023, where 75,000 Kaiser nurses went on strike, the largest strike in the history of nurses in the United States. Things are not getting better, they are worse. Not only are nurses unionizing, but so are physicians, because the truth is they are not able to provide the care they need to because there are no nurses at the bedside to care for their patients. And what this means is that healthcare is in serious trouble in the United States. Currently, there are over 100 million individuals in the United States of the 300 million who live here that do not have a primary care provider. More than half of states are going to outstrip their nursing demand, will outstrip supply in the next 5 years. And based on another study, if the current trends persist, 29 states won't be able to meet demands for nursing talent in the next 5 years, and the other 20 will be facing significant shortage there. So I looked to somebody much smarter than me to define that if you continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, you are living in the definition of insanity. And the reason that we are here today is to try to stop the insanity. Every one of you here, it is a small, concise group, we hope becomes the future of what drives us to make the changes that are going to be necessary not only to save the nursing profession, but to save with it healthcare. Because where would the world be without nursing? Nurses helped lead the women's suffrage movement and women's rights to vote. It was nursing care that saved the failing hospital systems in the 1920s and being deplorable places that made healthcare and hospitals the center of healthcare in the United States. And let us be very, very honest. While everyone else fled the hospital systems and sat behind screens, it was the nurses who saved our hospital and healthcare systems, our nursing homes, and our home cares, because they crossed the threshold when no one else would. They risked their lives, died at twice the rate of any other profession. And what I can say is the legacy that we must leave is I truly believe that it will be nurses who save the future of healthcare if we save them. Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and I hope that this helps set the stage for our impressive direction of speakers coming next.